Garson from the Tony Blair Institute. Her profile is up there for us to read, and we'll have a presentation about 20 minutes where you'll be taking notes and learning. Afterwards, we'll get a chance to ask Melanie some few questions. Melanie joining us online. Melanie, are you there? Good to see you.
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you, Melanie. Thank you so much for joining us here in South Africa.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I'm not there in person. It looks absolutely fantastic.
It is fantastic indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Melanie. Please give her a round of applause as she joined us online. And over to you, Melanie.
Distinguished guests, participants in the room, participants online, like myself, thank you for having me. It's really an honor to have a chance to speak to you today on behalf of the Tony Blair Institute. And particularly after that session that really helped situate where we're thinking, and a lot of the work we do in thinking how you build a resilient 21st century government. So that's me. You've seen my profile. I'm the cyber policy lead at the Tony Blair Institute. I'm also an associate professor at University College London, where as part of my role there, I actually spend time also going into the Treasury in the UK, also talking about how do you know you're solving the right problem, particularly when you're thinking about grand Treasury problems. As far as the Institute, for those of you that don't know us, we're located in about 40 countries globally. We're about 1,000 people. And our work is focused very much on policy, strategy, and delivery, with tech underpinning all that, and a little bit of the vision that we talk about with leadership and the work that we do is what the subject is today. And that's beginning with thinking, what is resilient 21st century government? And resilient means lots of things to all people. And I'm a cyber person, so resilience takes on a whole different meaning, which I might touch on at the end. And it was great to see the previous session, talking about dealing with COVID, and the UK was exactly the same. That was a spike in claims made during COVID. And the government, like many governments, couldn't scramble quickly enough, did not have the personnel to deal with it. So they went for a massive hiring process to think, well, we need lots more people to try and deal with all these claims. And of course, what happened to do the hiring, by the time, hiring in government here is terribly slow. I don't know if it's different where you are, but I should imagine it's not a quick process. And by that time, actually, it had tailed off. So it really began to think about how efficiency of the state works, and how we have to really think about reimagining what the state is in the 21st century, and where tech sits as an enabler of that. And that's thinking about the state holistically. And, really, this is sort of mentioned in the previous sector, even in session, even within government, sort of where the silos are, we're finding that interoperability, not just about reimagining one department, just not reimagining one set of patients, but really thinking about how do you step back and think about how the state is, who its partners are, what is the potential for science and technology to really transform that for better services, for better citizen engagement. And if we look back at, what the 20th century state, the state that we're sort of working with for a lot of us, it only met citizens done with a huge amount of human effort. And we had to think about ways to make that effort easier, whether that was through standardization, whether it's through bureaucracy, and also the thinking about the status quo bandwidth that we have for it. And what we're finding is scarce funding, because of the just huge size of that endeavor, is not going to addressing the crisis, it's not going into investments, not going into the delivery that we need. And that leads to a lot of ineffectiveness, and that in turn impacts the politics and the political debates that we're leading on, with either one side of claims that services aren't addressing real people, that there's corruption in the system, and it becomes a tool by which opponents attack. And it leads to a consequent lack of faith in government. So bearing in mind that the role of government is to be in service to the people, to work better for the people that they serve. And as we come into the 21st century, we've found that, technology is the path that makes that possible as we move through these sort of states where state has a lot of power over its citizen, to technological innovation to perform its functions more strategically with more empowerment of citizens in this picture. But that creates challenges, and some of the challenges you've also been listening to just before. And for the developed world, in places like the UK, we have deeply entrenched processes and systems that are quite resistant to taking on new policies. In the UK, there is an issue, for instance, with doctors not wanting to share data into the biobank. So that, got old processes, old ways of doing things that don't always facilitate that. That makes replacing legacy systems challenging. In the developing world, there's opportunity because there's a space not to replicate 20th century bureaucracy. They're going to miss out that huge unworldliness and really think about how you create that from scratch. And in Cambodia, this is the approach that is being taken in. They're sort of adopting actually a lot of tools from Singapore, and you can mention that the Singtel approach, and really sort of leapfrogging into that greater efficiency. Now, we talked about, and in the previous session, of course, that AI comes into it because we've already gone past, we've had our ICT era, we've got, the way that information can be solved. We've had the revolution that allows those routine tasks to be phased, and now we're in this ultra accelerated AI era where we have that combination of machine knowledge and production alongside human knowledge. So where artificial intelligence works alongside human intelligence to really think about how we redistribute human production, how in that teaming we can completely reshape the way that we do government like we never have before. And this revolution we're in is absolutely unprecedented in scale, in scope, in how we're doing it. It's reshaping how the trade and the very fabric of how we operate. So it's aligned to, it's come from having better semiconductors, access to the cloud, this amount of data, with 99% of all human data produced in the last decade, the quintillion of bits of data we produce every single day, and then the advent of generative AI that has a new methods of doing things. Now, by the same token, this is driving demand for chips and cloud data. And one of the questions that was asked earlier was about this digital divide and about the universal coverage that this opens up. I'm been honored enough to be able to speak again tomorrow while we're doing a little bit about compute and the access to compute being part of that digital divide, but also where initiatives where we're pushing towards universal coverage, it's really opening up the access to the benefits of these technologies. So what we're shifting to is a state that begins to master the AI era for its benefits. So also put AI in the service of the state for its citizens and really think about how that's used to break through the bureaucracy, how we create new connections, and the more that we enable this new tech, the lower the cost of these connections become, and how we analyze this data for new opportunities. And so that thinks about, well, what is this new model with the state, and how, we've heard some great examples in the previous session. I almost feel a bit redundant, to tell you the truth, because it's like you've got it all there, all those examples that were given of how the state comes to reimagining what it does and how it does it and who does it, and whether you run on a digital background, or whether you rely on armies of civil servants anymore. Or is it going to be fast? Is it going to be slow? Can it solve connected issues, or is it only dealing with problems in its silos? How agile is it to problems? Exactly with the slide that I started off with, when you've got a crisis, can it be quickly activate into that? Is it open or closed? And whilst states that close off are more vulnerable, the state is open. Do they have more prosperity? That comes with security risks to some extent. And how targeted is a state in what it is trying to do? Now, when we look at states, we have to look at how quickly the private sector is embracing these opportunities. We know, state and government runs much further behind. But if we look at the impact that this kind of absorption is having in the private sector and thinking about how do we replicate those kind of dividends into the public sector. So, knowledge workers are completing 12% more tasks, 25% more quickly. So what would the impact of that be if we can bring it into government? If we're thinking about AI assistants that can deal with queries much faster, whether, kind of businesses that are using it are 40% more efficient and have 70% higher customer satisfaction. So imagine from a government perspective that people are always 70% higher satisfaction when people are engaging with it, and thinking about the extent that does it improve the quality of decision making. The other thing, and this was also mentioned in the previous session, that private sector is doing, and the challenges is the investment in the infrastructure. And this has become, and there was a question earlier, and I have a slide in a bit that goes into sort of how much of your taxpayer dollars are going into producing this, but it's thinking about what is the investment that, if you think about companies are putting into it. So it's reported they're going to have invest up to $250 billion into AI infrastructure by 2028. So really think about what the amount of people we're providing for and how much we need to invest into that. But what we are seeing, and we've heard some great examples already this morning, is that there are existing AI tools in place and across the public sector that are really having a massive impact in how they're being applied. So if we look here in the UK, that a hospital trust in Wales that really couldn't accurately predict and plan for its beds, for its services, used a combination of an AI tool and a digital twin designed to accelerate discharges from hospitals. And this related for one particular hospital in a bed saving, a 3,000 bed saving for bed days saving per year. It saved 21,000 hours of staff administration time by automating this administration. In the end, tangibly reducing these backlogs, reducing these wait times actually can lead to a reduction in death. We've got thinking about where you make policy more act, where you have summaries, where consultation responses can be processed. So when a government opens a consultation in 12 days and not 3 months, and that can come with massive saving costs to government. So it's where you get that investment into it and where they come that investment out, where that can be better redesigned or redeployed across government. We have all sorts of government jobs that can be done that AI can jump in and improve. And that goes from the citizen engagement. We've heard about some of that already, whether that's providing information, whether that's dealing with casework, and that's going through responses, helping speed up those processes, and also in helping the decision making, in accessing and developing new policies, in monitoring the implementation of current policies. So really across the board, when we begin to step back and think about where can we use this alongside human endeavor. Again, this is something that we've alluded to or discussed in the previous session quite clearly, is that tension. Well, what happens to the jobs? And this is not always about replacing jobs. It is also about accelerating how you do your work. And it's sort of that adage of it's not necessarily that AI is going to replace your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI well, they're the people that can replace your jobs. And I think it's the same within your system. So when we begin to think about as we're integrating technology, it always has this limitless potential across a wide range of services and government departments. As we said, from speeding up analysis, from forecasting demand, from modeling those complex systems, from understanding opinions, and from even running private offices, from even preparing those briefings or helping prepare those briefings. It's allowed to supercharge the processes that are unwieldy, that heavy 20th century, big state bureaucracy. So, and it's very much lowering the effort and friction and costs of citizen engagement. And by the same token, that reduces inequality of access. So where in Seoul, Korea, they have sort of all their public sector data came together, they have citizen consultants that have new formatting, style and timing and language. You've got the automation of transactional public services. And Portugal, we're really advanced for this sort of thinking about this with energy charity. I think Portugal have also even been experimenting with sort of elements of the divorce process going through with AI assistance for the beginning stages. So really think about how you can automate those transactional services. India has had this massive really rise and sort of associated with their digital payment. They had a huge failure in welfare payments. It was fundamentally fraught with fraud. Only about 20% of people in India had sufficient identification to be able to open a bank account. With that 90% adoption of digital ID, so it covers like 1.3 billion people with the Indian Aadhaar. Banking penetration rose from 20% up to 80%, and this is by 2021. So direct transfers now of funds to new bank accounts are eliminated. Fraud and corruption actually saved the government like 2.22 trillion rupees. That's sort of $29 billion. And overall, that was about 5% of the federal budget was saved by doing this. So really helps create that equality within services. I'd say it's multiplying out the quality and the data, the daily tasks, being able to streamline and analyze complex workflows, as we talked about already, thinking about where optimized bed allocation that we saw in Wales, but also really analyze real-time data at pace and scale. This is becoming increasingly used within tools such as in cybercrime, such as sort of identifying misinformation and thinking how we can react with it. And it's, allowing data, policy makers, better research to be able to operate across different assumptions and have more effective delivery. So in the COVID early warning system in the UK, it's sort of enabled frontline data to be seen in near real time. We've seen the improvement of briefings as Red Box Pilot in the UK that's helping ministers improve the strength of their briefings and also understanding public sentiment. So again, a case for the US and the service from UK service from Varian that really thinking about how you can aggregate this analysis and interpretation of public sentiment across a number of data channels to really think about the improvement of public services. And this is where we're going to come to in a minute, with like the right enablers in place. So because when the right enablers in place, we have a deeper transformation possible and really thinking about where AI can be used as a default. So we talked a little bit about the digital assistants as a channel for recommended services, having a multidisciplinary AI support team, national policy twins that can really, and again, let's go to where we have this question of silos and information sharing, and how can you do this instant simulation of complex scenarios and their long-term impact. And so if we think about all the ways that a digital assistant can be used to make services personalized and make them more pleasant to use, so you have related services that can have review and confirmation, where you can get pre-approval notifications, where you can have a national policy twin, and to say that really brings together, that can visualize government, can see that knock-on effect that you're seeing. I must admit, on that level, I'm often thinking why we're not applying more policy trends to just traffic circulation, but it's the equivalent of thinking about when you're driving down a road and you see all the different roads that you're trying to take diversion through are all blocked off, and using tools like a national policy trend really accelerate that decision, be able to see very quickly across government where might be stoppers for the incredible ideas that Treasury might have, but maybe fall down in the Department of Work and Pensions because an element of it isn't there. So really breaking through these silos and being able to, in real time, rewrite those projects. So going to the investment question, and really over, you asked in your context, like how much your taxpayer money is being paid into doing this and investing in technology. Well, the initial costs are going to be huge and are going to be massive, but certainly what we're projecting in the UK could far exceed the upfront cost. So we're talking about an investment of 9.2 billion in this interoperability implementation, but that would gain 200 billion pounds in productivity gain, assuming the tasks that you would, a third of tasks were affected. So the investment will yield massive gains and growth and better allocation of resources in the future. Now, as has been mentioned, this relies on having best-in-class infrastructure and really thinking about shifting to that national deal to cloud infrastructure, whether you have a digital ID for every citizen, government apps running on the national cloud. This also address to some extent some of the cyber issues depending on who your cloud hosting is. And then, as again spoke about in the previous session, digital skills training for both government and citizens, and making sure that there's both the digital skills to use these digital services and also bringing in the training to actually build them inside government. We think about the connectivity, and that's a combination of terrestrial and satellite coverage on a wide base. And whilst we still need to close that, particularly that last 10%, the terrestrial internet still provides better latency. There is those opportunities now to work with satellite providers, particularly in rural areas. And this becomes really important when you combine that. So for instance, in Bangladesh, there's a project looking at telemedicine that 60% of Bangladesh lived in rural areas. Sometimes they only had 3 medical staff per 10,000 citizens, and by building connectivity using technology, they were able to increase telemedicine access that actually reduce costs to see a doctor by 56%. So really thinking about how we integrate that and have that holistic vision of the two. Leadership needs to do a comprehensive analysis. What they do often with this as part of the work we do is thinking about how, are these systems connected? Are the solutions best in time? Are the systems providing value add? And is what you're building scalable and inclusive? Because however much you build, it's like a plant. You can't shout at it, grow and grow and grow. You've got to give it the conditions to be able to scale and to be able to grow. As a person, and this has been mentioned as cybercrime, this produces risks, and you've seen this particularly across Africa in recent months, where environmental action has sort of damaged the subsea cables and damaged connectivity. We've had, the UK and looking towards countries like Costa Rica, where they had a huge ransomware attack on government, where you get geopolitical hacktivists or ransomware groups sort of actively targeting what is low-hanging fruit, what can often are unprotected systems. And worldwide outages, like we saw with the CrowdStrike, and thinking about our systems as we build out these systems, are we making sure that, going back to what is resilience, that we build these systems, we build these, put in this incredible investment into making government more efficient, but is it able to operate in the time? Have we done everything to protect it? But resilience and bringing that key of resilience is also that, do we still have that plan of action, the backup plan of if things are not always there, how do we work through it? So the best analogy I like to say is, are we stuck in an elevator if things go down, or are we an escalator? Can we still operate through that resilience? As we build that reliance on technology, is it agile? Is it adaptable? Is it secure? And are we able to still operate well and at pace that's, well, maybe the slightly slower pace, but things will still become operable in the untoward circumstances that we can't work with that. So really thinking about how we secure that data, baking in security requirements into this digital infrastructure. And we need to build this in place, because the faster we build it, the better and quicker the returns. It's really stepping back, having that holistic view, so it's not going to hit a bottleneck at some point later on. And just a minor thought, because one of the areas that I also work in is thinking about where tech policy sits on the global stage, where this sits with foreign policy, where this sits with diplomacy, because of being part of this world is also thinking about, is the diplomatic capacity equipped to engage in these conversations, engage in the governance conversations about this tech. And actually, this is a picture of an upcoming report that I'll be releasing. It's a sneak preview on sort of countries that sort of still don't have cyber ambassadors or don't have tech diplomats. And these are part of the picture, because it is working within the tech ecosystem that are going to be building the tech, and also on the global regulations of the tech. So leaving it there, and that sort of whistle-stop tour for a lot of how we think and how we come to thinking about what is the reimagined state look like, where that has real-time data for policy, where you have, you know, research inspired new ideas, where there's closer integration with the people building the tech, and a constant source of information to give leadership an overview for a better future. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I don't know how many minutes I have left to actually answer any questions, but I'm happy to answer a couple.
Thank you, Melanie. That's Melanie Garson joining us live from London, the Tony Blair Institute. Melanie, a few questions are coming in online here, but just maybe to kickstart, we don't have much time, just to get your quick reaction or maybe advice that, given the data security issues and risks that you've outlined there, where do government draw a line between the optimum use or sharing of data and protecting the data of ordinary citizens? We've seen a case of reported cases of data, our devices lost in we've seen the reports of devices lost in the Ministry of Justice in the UK, and also I think the Home Office lost a number of devices that putting the data of the ordinary citizens of the UK at risk. So how do we draw that line between the optimum use and the sharing or the use of data of ordinary citizens?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it's one that people have the most fear about. I mean, the examples you've given of actually human error above all the other things that we have to think about. It goes in this combination of having the right level of data protection laws. I think there's the two things: know your data, know where your data is, thinking about what are your crown jewels in that data. So this is where we begin to get the decisions of what kind of cloud edge data center structure is right for any individual government. And thinking about the technological solutions, so like the privacy enhancing technologies, so, you know, the financial sector do it well, where we have that data sharing, where we can strip out the sensitive data and share the data that improves the kind of decision making that you need. So it's not, you know, there's a series of decisions, but it is also having that holistic overview of knowing all your data sources, where that's being kept and how they work together. But it's not an easy, it's not an easy problem to solve by any means.
Thank you so much, Melanie. We have Nikki on the slide that is asking that given the future roadmap for digital transformation, when will the operating systems of governments be adjusted to accommodate the updated technology? Do you have any views on that?
Again, it's one that's very close to our hearts, that question, because it's working with governments to actually leapfrog some of these elements of digital transformation, to integrate these tools along the way. But it does come back to, and as you say, thinking about these baseline technologies we have. When I talk tomorrow about the future of access to compute, and this is a surprising amount of it, that we did an index where we looked at sort of 55 countries, and only 36% of those countries had access to machine learning cloud that was optimized for machine learning. So it actually comes back to really resisting sometimes the temptation to invest in the new shiny tools and make sure that the investment has gone into these baseline infrastructures. And that's, we can think about the access to cloud, but it also involves having that access to energy. So really understanding the sort of matryoshka doll, if you want, of where you underpick and think about where do you need to start with this.
Do we have any questions in the room that we can take a hand that you want to maybe voice your question? You are welcome to do so. Whilst we're still searching for one, Melanie, there is Muroka Kautsane, who's asking really on Slido that how is the just transition, which is quite a popular topic of late, how is it impacting the speedy implementation of digital transformation?
It's a really good question. Again, I think it's difficult to generalize across, all countries. And I still stand by it. So it's similar to my answer to the previous question. It's making sure that the countries can see the real picture of the infrastructure, of their services, and be able to optimize and design their journey. And I think that's, and this is something we do at the Institute. It's why we work in countries with individual governments, because there are no one-size-fits-all journeys for countries in this picture. It's really thinking about how you can look at that in your country. What are your priorities? And work from that picture to optimize the pace for yourself.
Let's see if we have any takers in the house. Going once, twice. There's a gentleman raising a hand. Just briefly, sorry, go ahead. Just briefly, a quick question to Melanie, and she'll respond.
So Melanie, one of the speakers before you mentioned one thing a few times which I resonated with, which is when you're doing this transformation, what you need to think about what problems you're trying to solve. And one of your slides was talking about how technology is improving healthcare, right? But now I'm trying to understand there where healthcare is going to be assisted in a case where you don't have enough healthcare professionals, but you do have the technology. That's my question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And there's actually a whole series of policies that we're thinking about. And I could talk about this for a while, but I will direct you. The Institute has published some work on there in the healthcare system, in where looking at what we call digital patient beds, the combination of having wearable technology that can help monitoring at distance. So if you think about that combination of a wearable feeding into a system that can provide alerts, that could then in turn, as was pointed out in the previous session, tell the pharmacist that you need a prescription or that your prescription's running out. And there are areas where we look at that combination can solve some of these problems of lack of access directly to to an in-person physician.
Thank you, Melanie. We do have a number of questions still, but because of time, unfortunately, we have to stop it here. Samuel Bongani Sikanka asked about the 21st government and how it enhances accessibility to digital platforms. We have Musa Kumete, who also asked about cloud hosting of information, whether the risks are there and how they can be mitigated. Shabalala Muiponi coming about the practicality of citizens when it comes to training and the use in digital era that is skills. We wouldn't have time for this, but if you can, Melanie, I'm not sure if you are on Slido, you could perhaps respond to some of these after we concluded this. But thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure hosting you all the way from the United Kingdom. We wish you all the best. In fact, we wish you that maybe next year you could take and jet off to come and join us here, making things much more interpersonal and easier, but we are glad to host you online still.
Thank you so much and have a great conference, everyone.
Thank you. That is Melanie Garson.